10-acre lots or more, I think it'll stay more like it is. As if they get all the, tenth of an acre, quarter acre, tenth of an acre houses, that's when I think it would change for us. So that's what I'm trying to get
Okay, I guess we're gonna get started.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Well, I'm Karen Kerner. I'm the program chairman for the Lakehills Garden Club, Lakehills Library Garden Club. We welcome all of you here. See some familiar faces and some new faces, so we welcome everybody. Do we want to give a few announcements now? Okay. First, does anybody who doesn't have a short agenda want a short agenda? Very short.
Okay, I'm Debbie Mill. I'm part of the Garden Club as well. And I just have a few announcements. We have some freebies here today. So we have garden books. I'm also run the book sale here. And so I grabbed the garden books, and I put them out for us. So take what you want, please. So some of them are old, but some of them have really good information in them. So take whatever you want. We also, Mr. Stein, you want to talk about your freebie? Can you tell us what it is?
They're Anaconcha orchid seeds. And they do great. Put them in full sun, they get big. I have some that were in a little shaded area. They're small and they've been in the ground, a lot longer than the great big ones. So they're easy to grow, beautiful, have little white flowers in the spring. They're like a dogwood is what it looks like.
They're beautiful.
And get you a handful and
Now, do you start them in little pots and then plant them into the ground, or do you?
both.
You do both. Okay. Okay.
How much water?
They're very drought resistant, and whenever it gets really hot and dry like this, you might give them a little water, but other than that, they're very tolerant.
Mr. Jerry, did you have also something to add?
Okay, I've got,
I love gardeners.
and I'll bring more. I've never expected this, so I can bring more. I've got a lot of Crawford lettuce seed, and if anybody knows about Crawford lettuce, if you don't know about it, you didn't watch Steve Brown on WAI because, or KSAT, because he talked about every year he'd have these, the seed, when they bolt, he'd cut the limb off and he'd just plant them like this, okay? But I keep the seeds, so I have some Crawford lettuce, some Morgan, some this here. The black seeds are this. They're yuccas.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that put out those orange flowers. Okay, and then I have one more, and everybody, I can bring more next time. Chives.
Oh, chives.
And I've got chives I've had for 10 years, and they just keep going. You can't kill them.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Mary Alice, I know you wanted to make an announcement.
Last time you may remember Gwen,
Lingenfelter.
she recommended we get our soil tested, and I did that to prepare for the fall garden. So it's easy, you just go to Mansfield Park, to the extension agent there, you get a little sack and it has instructions on how to gather your soil, and Gwen was saying take it from 5 or 6 different spots. So I got the one that does all, so it has like tables that look like this, and it gives you individual recommendations for what fertilizer you need, which is so helpful, I thought. And I also added the organic material part, because when you're on caliche, you don't know how much organic, anyway, that's important to know for whether anything will grow. But anyway, it's super easy. If I can do it, you can do it, and it's an important part of preparing your fall garden, any garden, yeah.
Thank you, Mary Alice, and thank you for being a guinea pig. That's great.
Oh, what was the cost for that?
I think the budget one without the organic content is $12 or $18,
Yeah, super
but the
cheap.
one I got is 46, cause I wanted to know the organic mix.
It's taxpayer subsidized, that's why it's cheap.
Okay, yeah, okay.
I'm joking, but
Yeah, no,
literally, it's
yeah.
the extension agent, that's why they keep it affordable.
Yeah.
So you can actually have it done,
Yeah.
so it's not like a couple, few $100s.
And let me just add one more announcement. We sent out the schedule to anybody that's on the mailing list last night. There's also one over here. We've already got changes. Yes, that one right there. We've already got changes to it. We just found out that October the 26th, which is for Saturday, is early voting. So this room is occupied. So we may roll it back a week. And then there was one more change that I'm not sure of, but we will get it out to y'all on what the change in the schedule is. And you can always go to the lakehillslibrary.org website, click Garden Club at the top right, and there's a calendar in there. It's also on the library calendar, so you can kind of see what's coming up. That's all I have.
Thank you, and then the last announcement, is very important. I don't know if you've noticed our garden, a demonstration garden, the project is really moving along, cause we move along as we get money or donations, and we've been very fortunate. So we're, going to have decomposed granite. I'm gonna have it delivered on Friday the 13th. But
Love you guys.
that's just the way my life works. But the volunteer day, and it won't take us long if we have a lot of volunteers to help spread it. It's gonna be Saturday the 14th, the next morning. And we'll probably start, the people who've been working on that, we usually start like at 7:30 in the morning just because of the heat. So, if you, we'll have water for you and some snacks. If you would please like to help us, all you need to do is bring a shovel, or if you have a good, one of the old-fashioned, what are they,
Metal.
rock rakes?
Metal rake.
Yeah, the metal rakes, because you turn them upside down and we, so, and then we will have a little tamper, and then we'll be tamping it down and wetting it. But we're having 9 yards delivered. So, because we wanna make sure it's nice and compact, and then shortly after that, the water catchment system. So we have to get the granite in, and then we'll get our, water tank. So anyway, but I think that's the end of our announcements. I'm sorry, thank you for letting us make those announcements.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Today, we have, kind of a repeat performer. Jonathan was here some months ago, maybe a year ago, talking about oak wilt. He's a local arborist and is very knowledgeable about everything tree-like. And so today, Jonathan is gonna talk to us about what to plan for if you want to plant trees on your property. We don't wanna do it in this heat, and he'll tell us when we do wanna do it and how we wanna do it. Jonathan, is there anything else you wanna say about yourself or your
Sure.
company in the Blessed Land, and then you can begin?
Sounds good, I have till when? Till 12?
12:15.
We end at 12:30, so if you end a little earlier, then people may
We'll have time for
us to
questions,
Yeah.
feedback. All right, so I had a tree and landscaping business for a long time, and I grew up doing tree trimming and stuff with my dad, and then started my own business, and I decided to become a certified arborist. I went to college, did a plant and soil science degree at Texas Tech, and then when I was about halfway through that, I took the test for the ISA certified arborist designation, and I got that. So I've been a certified arborist for like 10 years, and I don't do landscaping anymore. I don't do tree pruning or removal anymore. I don't even do tree planting. So just so you know, I'm not the guy to plant a tree for you. Okay. What I want to do is actually equip you to plant your own tree, or at least know what you're getting into if you're going to have trees planted. A lot of what we're going to talk about are going to be when we get to the plant, what to choose, the different selections that you could try to find. They're not going to be sort of the beaten path nursery trees that you're going to find really easily. And so when you are finding that kind of tree, what happens a lot of times is if you call up a landscaper and you're like, hey, I want to plant one of these, and they may not return your phone call because it's not something they're going to be able to find, and they know that they're going to be getting into some thing that's kind of fringe or on the edges of the norms, unfortunately, because the way the industry is. And so they're going to have a hard time finding it. They might not be able to find a very nice specimen that's very big, and they're not going to really make anything on it, and it's going to be a headache for them, because then there's going to be a lot of questions for them. Hey, why is this tree? They don't know the tree. So it's kind of asking them to get into a real uncomfortable spot, and they may not want to do that. But if the community has more of a drive, if there's more demand for different kind of trees, then ultimately, hopefully, the industry will change, and it really needs to change, because there's so much oak wilt in the area that the predominant tree in our area, which is an amazing tree, it's probably my favorite tree besides the oak wilt, the live oak that we have everywhere, they're getting decimated. And so even though that's probably my favorite, I kind of have to ignore that tree in a lot of ways and plant my new favorites that are not that. Even though that's really my favorite, I can't in good conscience plant one that I'm not gonna, that I'm gonna assume is, oh, that's not gonna get oak wilt, it'll be fine. It's not wise to do that with any of the oaks, and all the oaks can get oak wilt. But anyway, I'm a serious Christian. I had my business for my tree and landscaping business for a bunch of years, and now I'm doing land consulting, and I can take a look at properties for oak wilt and stuff like that, sort of like a home inspection before you buy land. I can take a look at your property and do a write-up if you would like, and all that sort of stuff. I can treat oak trees for oak wilt, and we'll try to do the high-value trees and then plant other things to get some biodiversity in there, because oak wilt can't spread from a live oak tree to a mulberry tree or an elm tree, or there's some things that go interspecies, intergenous, but that's what we want to do. Is the more biodiversity that we have, the more resilient the landscape is. And so that's why I'm talking about sort of a lot of stuff that's not maybe stuff you've even heard of before, but they're in the area if you're looking, or they're suited for the area. So let's start by saying I do not recommend any citrus trees in our area. Okay? We'll just go ahead and get the worst part out of the way. So what the deal is with citrus trees and a lot of fruit trees that you're going to find is that they're grafted. And so they take a hardy rootstock, and they'll take the cultivated variety that is real good, and they'll take a cutting off that and they'll graft it. And when we have a hard freeze, it may die to the ground, and then it might come back. Like, oh, it came back. All right. Except for not all right, because the part that comes back is actually from the rootstock. And you'll end up with very thorny, lots of seeds, not good tasting citrus that you're like, yeah, it's a citrus tree, but it has horrible fruit. And that just is normal. And so, especially if we have randomly like a snowmageddon sort of scenario, it's just not worth planting citrus in my opinion, unless you're going to do it in a greenhouse, or you're going to bring it inside and do like a Meyer lemon or something like that, where you're actually going to bring it into the house. So that's just, let's get that out of the way.
What's the chances of what comes back up grafting another citrus to that?
You could do it.
I'm planting, okay.
Do it. Yeah, that's awesome. Most people just aren't going to do that. But yeah, so that's the idea. That goes for a lot of different fruit trees, pecans and lots of things. Peach trees, pear trees. They're generally grafted, but most of them are not going to freeze back in the cold. But some of the ones that are really meant to be in warmer climates, they will, and that's when you have a problem. Okay, so And by the way, the other part of my business is I do bee leasing. So I actually lease bee colonies to people for ag exemptions. And in Bandera County, you need 3 colonies, and I usually will lease those for $500 per colony per year. So like $1,500. It takes about 5 years. It takes 5 years to get your ag use history. In the 6th year, you can get your exemption. 7th year, you can actually convert it to a wildlife management exemption if you want. I also do bee removals, so I'll cut bees out of a house and that sort of thing too. So yes, ma'am.
Okay, because we have a railroad tie wall. We had someone come look at it, and so, I don't know, we probably need a second opinion.
Let's talk about it. Sometimes they're ground hornets that don't produce any honey. All they produce is lots of stings. So
Yeah.
those ones aren't worth getting. But so anyway, back to the stuff about trees. So let's talk about how to plant a tree first, and we'll get into the selections towards the end. So how to plant a tree? You want to select the right tree. So you want to do your research. Okay, so I'm hoping to help you get going on some ideas, and then you research until you have confidence in that after this is done. And like I said, we'll go into that later. The first step is to dig a hole that is not deeper than the root ball. Okay, so I have some props over here. This is what they call 5-gallon bucket. They get in trouble for that because it's not actually 5 gallons, so they'll call it a number 5 sometimes. But basically, what's in here is where the root ball is. The contents of the tree that are in here, that's the root ball. So you want to dig a hole that's not deeper than that. And it's very important not to plant a tree too deep. That's probably one of the most important things is do not plant the tree too deep. And the reason is because the root flare needs to be exposed because it's not the same kind of tissue as root tissue. So when you look at this drawing where you have, this is the ground level, this is the tree, that transition area from trunk to roots, this area right here is called the root flare. And if you put soil up here, let's say that we did this. We just filled that in. What that does is it encourages microbes and insects to continually attack this bark. And that's, like I said, it's not root tissue, and it can't revert really back to root tissue. And so it's constantly getting attacked. And that moisture is staying on that, and eventually, likely something's going to break through the defense of the tree, and it's going to cause it to have major problems. It's sort of like people having wet feet. Like in the military, they tell people, keep your feet dry, change your socks. Like, your feet are your main thing. If you're marching and your feet are destroyed, you can't do anything. Well, a tree has a lot of kind of similarities that where if it has wet feet, it's going to have problems. If it had been, in a way where it's above where it's supposed to be. So just in the same way, you wouldn't want to cover soil around an established tree, and instead you want to make a tree well where it kind of sinks down around that, and you put rocks or whatever you want around that, that's fine. You don't want to plant the tree too deep either. And one of the main reasons that you'll end up with a tree that's below is you plant it at the right height and then it sinks down because the soil is compacting after you plant it. And the industry standard is that they use potting media for the pots. Well, potting media is not actually soil. Soil is actually made out of rock, which is a mind bender. The first time I heard that, I'm like, in my class, I'm like, what are you looking at, right? Like, no, it's actually made out of rock particles. That is what soil is. 95+% of soil is rock. And so it can compact, but it can't really degrade. So it's not going to be composting itself and turning into basically nothing. Whereas what they plant, nursery plants in is degrading as time goes on. They use it because Once it's moist, it tends to stay moist if they water it well. If it dries out, it's actually, can be really hard to re-wet, and that can be a problem. But it's easy to lift the plants, they're light, so their workers are moving these around, all this stuff. But when you plant that tree, as time goes on and that degrades, have you ever seen a tree that's sunk down or all the soil's missing around where that root ball is? That's why. So, it's better to plant a tree a little bit too high than too low. Ground level at a minimum, but really the best is a little bit high. So we want to make sure the root flare is exposed, and then what we want to do is we want to prune the root ball. So this is not an eyeball. This is a root ball. So this is looking at the tree like as if I'm looking above it down. Okay, I'm looking at the root ball. I'm ignoring everything above ground. This is just the stem coming out this way. So the ideal thing is that all the roots are growing out sort of like a wheel, like spokes on a wheel, wagon wheel, whatever kind of wheel you want to think of. And we want them to grow generally out. But what happens is in the nurseries, those roots will find the edge of the pot and they won't be able to grow out anymore, and they will start circling the pot. And so they'll start doing this. And all of them will start doing this sort of deal. And then you have what's called a girdling root. And all these just, okay, so that's a problem. If you take it out of the pot, you have dug your hole, you already did it the right height, you put it in there, it's sticking out a little bit, an inch or two, okay? But if you do that, you still can have major problems, because as these grow, they're not gonna stay these tiny little roots forever. They turn into some big roots, and then they're actually doing, they're girdling the tree, which is they're cutting off the circulation of the tree. So they're actually strangling the tree. And so that's why what you wanna do is you want to, when you take it out of there, there we go, that's good. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to cut those girdling roots, and it's okay to be aggressive. I'm gonna nobody freak out and pull out my pocket knife. What I do is I like to cut those girdling roots, and this is how I was taught, and it tends to work really well. And you can use a box cutter, you can use whatever, as long as it's going to get in there and actually cut those roots. And I don't mind being aggressive, because I'd rather the tree get fixed or die now, rather than in 20 years, 10, 20 years, it's got major issues, and then I've got to cut it down, do all that work, replace it, and then do it properly after that. So cut into that about every inch or two. So I'll literally I'll have the tree laying down this way with the bucket off of there, and I will cut all the way down, and I'll rotate it, and I'll do about every inch. I'll just keep cutting all the way through those girdling roots, because what we want is we want this, and we want to encourage these roots to have to grow into the soil that we're putting back in the hole, and we want them to do this. We want them to grow out, continually out. You get the idea. We want them to just keep growing outward. We don't want them to do any of that circling stuff. So even if you find a big, healthy looking root, like, I can't cut that root. I can't bring myself to cut that root. It's so nice. Why would I do that? This tree's gonna die. It might, but it's better for the tree ultimately. And what we're really hoping for is for the tree to get established. And then all that gets solved on its own. So the idea is that we put this tree, we plant this tree. This is a 1 gallon, or this is a 5 gallon. This is a 15 gallon. These are the two I recommend. This is my favorite. This is my second favorite. Bigger is really a big pain. You kinda need to have a couple people, to do it, and you're not really gaining a whole lot by doing that anyways, by planting something bigger than a 15. If you go less than a 5, it takes a long time. I've done all of them. Sometimes you don't have a choice. Sometimes you can't find something in a 15 or a 5, and you gotta do something else. And just, hey, well, I can only find this little seedling, but this is what I got, right? But what happens is that they say it takes a year per diameter inch or caliper inch of trunk for the tree to establish. So if you have a 1-inch diameter tree in a pot, it should take that tree roughly a year to establish. If you have a 3-inch diameter tree, it should take that tree 3 years to establish. So by the time that the 3-inch diameter tree is established, the 1-inch diameter tree could be established and have 2 years of growth and could actually catch up to the 3-inch diameter tree. So you're not really doing yourself any favors except for that instant gratification. The tree is a little bigger in the meantime, but it's probably gonna stay roughly static. It might grow a little bit, but it's roughly static during that time. So once the tree's in the ground, what I like to do is take what I cut off the root ball, doing that, or sometimes the root ball is actually, let's say that the soil is all the way to the top. The root flare will actually be lower, and you'll need to dig that out a little bit. Once you find that, and that's at or above grade, 1 or 2 inches, and then I like to chop off the bottom of the root ball, like at least that much. It's just easy to chop all those roots off the bottom. I don't want them going down. Roots generally grow out. This is another one of those mind benders. Okay, if the tree doesn't look like below ground what it looks like above ground, no, it looks like a pancake. The roots do. Then tree roots will generally grow, they say, about 2 to 4 times the height of the tree in a radius out from the trunk. So if a tree is 20 foot tall, the roots are probably gonna be at least 40 foot out in a radius, and it can be even more than that. They usually grow in the top 12 to, say, all the way down to 24 inches, and some outliers, but most roots are in that area. So the bottom of the root ball doesn't really matter that much. And I like to cut that off, and anything else when I'm roughing up the sides, sometimes you can, say using a knife only, you can use your fingers and kind of loosen it up. Take all that stuff, mix it in with the soil that you dug out of the hole, and it doesn't need to be real wide, it can be a little bit wider. Depends on who you ask, but this is the way I do it. You're incorporating that organic matter into that soil, and then that's helping the soil to be loose. It's helping those roots to actually be able to grow and colonize that area, and it's helping it to retain a little bit more moisture. But once the roots grow to that edge of the hole that you dug, and the soil you put back in with the stuff you basically amended it with, it's gonna have a hard life, okay? So we can do all the stuff to help them, but at some point, it's sort of like with children. It's like, you need to go and fly on your own. Like at some point, right? It's better for people to learn and do things on their own. And the same thing with trees. If the tree can't handle it on its own, it's probably not the best tree for our area. And so that's kind of a hard thing, a hard reality, because we want to have all these cool trees, whatever, you know, but that's the reality. Is if the tree, once established, is going to need me to pamper it, that's not a tree I really want, unless I'm already understanding that it's more of like a botanical garden sort of thing that I'm trying to do, where I'm getting it outside of its environment, and then I'm going to have to meet all of its criteria. I might need a greenhouse, I might need to bring in soil, I may need to change the pH a ton. It may be really difficult, but if that's the thing, we just need to be mentally prepared. To have a tree out there that you're hoping is going to outlast you, you want that tree to be well suited for the area, because at some point, if you move or you die or move on or whatever, and that tree is just on its own, do you want that tree to persist, right? So once it gets to the edge of that hole you dug and what you put back in, it's got native ground, and so it needs to be able to handle that. And so we'll get into watering and stuff later, but the idea is that we want to encourage that tree to grow into that area. And because we're cutting some of the root ball off, and because of winds and all kinds of stuff, what we really want to do is stabilize the tree so it can stand upright so that those roots can grow out into the soil. And so what I like to do is 3 T-posts. That way it's triangulated, so if any kind of wind it's able to stand up right in the middle. And I like to take something like this. It's like a wire, you can get it like Home Depot, Lowe's, whatever. And let me pull it out. So it's just this thin wire. It's not real expensive. And I like to get an old piece of old garden hose, like 3 of these, and I like to run that through there and around the tree. Not like this. We don't want to girdle the tree in another way. I want it to be loose on this whole end, and then the other ones are going to do the same. It's going to kind of lock it in, but I want the tree to move a little bit because it actually makes it stronger. But I don't want it to move enough that's going to fall over or pull roots out of the ground. All I'm trying to do is give this tree an opportunity to grow those roots from the root ball out. And each year, if you think about how much time it takes for roots to grow outward, let's say you plant the tree, those roots may not get to past, say, here in that first year. And they're not growing a ton. So every year, they're going out a little bit. If you water where the root ball is, that's not gonna cut it at the end of the day. You're gonna need to think about where this tree's growing, where's that root, where's the leading edge of those roots? Because it's the root hairs that are generally grabbing the water and the nutrients that are in the water, or suspended in the water solution. So you want to water that whole area instead of just the root ball. Also, when you just plant it, you don't need to water 10 feet out because it's just right there. It's not helping you to get past that. So yeah, we want to water, when you first plant it, you just need to basically water where the root ball is plus a tiny bit. Just encourage those roots out. And then as it goes, expand that a little bit and just keep doing that as time goes on over the next, up to like a year. Let's see if I missed anything. So if you're gonna prune when you're planting, the main thing you're really looking for is codominant stems. So it's really bad for trees in general to have 2 main trunks, because what happens is there's a narrow angle in there, and the trees will eventually, they'll grow to where those are touching, and then they cannot expand past that, and that's a haven for microbes and insects. As water gets in there and organic matter is breaking down, it's creating a really good environment for microbes and insects to be attacking that tree. And so you want to pick one of those 2, leave one and remove the other one. You can do that right then, or you can do it, you can plan to do it later. The time that I recommend planting a tree, it's changed over time. I used to plant all the time, and then I had enough failures in July and August that I'm just not doing that anymore. In even half of June, half of September. And then it was, what was this, 3 years ago? It's like an on-running saga. I don't remember, 2-3 years ago or something. We planted some trees, did this project. It was like a volunteer thing. And I was helping out, and I got all the trees, and people are sponsoring trees and all this stuff. And we planted them, I think in May. And we had the most, it must have been, what, 2.5 years ago. Yeah, almost 3 years ago maybe. Anyway, whenever that crazy drought started, that one, we had that, like, what in the world is happening? There's no rain, it's crazy hot, this is bonkers compared to the previous year or whatever. And normally you can plant in the spring. Not that year. We lost a few trees. And the guys were out there watering it, and it was just this uphill battle, and I'm just like, now, so if you're a landscaper, it's hard to say, yeah, we only plant in October or November, right? you're not gonna be able to put food on the table. That's the reality. And a lot of times, plants will make it, and it's fine. But if you have your choice, I recommend October, November, when it's cool enough and the tree has enough time to establish its roots more until spring comes. Because roots generally grow all winter long. That's a big asterisk on that, right? That's a big deal. The tree roots can grow all winter long, so even if the tree has dormant buds, or if it's forming buds and the tree's generally dormant, doesn't have leaves on it, or if it does or whatever, it can spread roots and establish all winter long, and then it can hit the ground running in the spring, and hopefully it's established by the end of that summer. So that's why I recommend in the fall. And if you just think about the water demands in the fall versus the summer, it's just less work for you to do, to plant something in the fall and water it through the winter. It's gonna be easier for that tree to make it. A lot of times, if you're planting something in the heat, it is hard for the tree to even establish those little root hairs to reestablish into that soil, to compensate, just even to compensate for the water it's losing every day from evaporation or from transpiration. So that's why I recommend that is October. I like to use a half a bag or a full bag of mulch over the top. And I don't recommend the dyed mulches, because a lot of times those actually have more like lumber in them sometimes, and they have uncomposted mulch in there, and so they dye those, and it makes it look nice. But if you have composted mulches, those are things that are naturally darker. It's because the leading edges on the surface, on all that surface area, has degraded, and so it's actually not pulling up nutrients out of the ground to help it degrade. It's actually beneficial. That's kind of getting in the weeds, but basically there's tons. We could do classes and classes on just mulch, but you can look into as much as you want. There's tons of amazing stuff about mulch, but basically the mulch is going to help in a lot of ways. Just know that. But one of the main things is water retention for the soil. Because when you're watering, if you're watering and it is just evaporating right out of the soil, that doesn't really help you much. When you have mulch there, it works its way through the mulch. It's hard for it to get back out. It helps to reduce the heat in the soil. It helps the water to actually get into the mulch, which is called infiltration. So it actually helps it to get into the soil in the first place. So mulch is awesome, but it can also encourage microbes that are actually helping the root systems, and they're learning a lot about that sort of thing. The mycelium and all the different microbes in the soil, they're really, really, really helping the roots because of the mulch. So what I would recommend is a half a bag to a full bag of mulch, and I like to do it sort of like a pizza crust. You kind of get it thin on the field of the area, and then kind of a little berm on the outside, and that little berm on the outside kind of helps it not to run out the edges, and helps it kind of make it like a little bit of a bowl, and helps it really soak in. But you don't want to put it deep on the trunk for the same reason as we don't want to cover a root flare of the soil. So that last little bit, you can leave it bare or leave it, really thin mulch. But you never want to build mulch up on a trunk. When you're planting whether you're planting a tree or not. But yeah, there's a lot of benefits to mulch. Something you can do if you want to go above and beyond, you can actually put mulch in the area where you want to, in the spot where you want to plant a tree ahead of time, and it can actually help get those microbes going even before you plant the tree. And then you would maybe just rake that out of the way, plant the tree, and then use it at the end, and you're helping that tree hit the ground running. So getting into more specifics of individual plants. Oh, also, before I forget, this right here is sort of like that orange stuff for construction sites. If you want to have heartache, ignore the deer. If you want to have success and not heartache, I recommend you put something around your tree if there's deer anywhere near there, because those bucks will rub those trunks and they will ruin half the bark, and sometimes they can grow out of it, but it's really not fun to do all that work. Your tree's doing well, and then all of a sudden this deer goes along and ruins your tree. So I recommend you either put this right on the trunk, or probably my favorite thing to do so that they can't just walk up and nibble leaves and stuff too, is to put some old fencing around the outside of the T-posts that you're putting in. Getting into like species and whatnot, there's common names and there's scientific names. Okay, so this is, if you've ever heard of a Spanish oak, right? Anything can be called a Spanish oak. I mean, you could probably call a mountain laurel a Spanish oak if you wanted to. And there's just, that's a Spanish oak. That's a Spanish oak. That's the problem with common names, is they're a little bit, it's a little bit loose of terminology that gets bound to a specific species, and you'll have totally different species with same common names, like ironwood. There's a Condalia bush that's real thorny in this tree out in the east that both called ironwood because the wood's hard, so somebody called it that at one point. So when you're looking up something, it's wise to look up, try to find the species name. And a lot of times if you just go into search engines are awesome for this sort of thing. Go in a search engine, because I don't know what I'm doing a lot of times either. I'm learning about trees all the time. And that's why I would even know about anything about trees, really, in a lot of ways. Okay, what's this tree I heard about? I'm gonna type it in search engine. Okay, go in, Wikipedia or whatever, like some A&M has their website or whatever. Okay, what's the scientific name? Just so I'm cross-referencing that correctly, the genus and species. And then I can look that up, and that's gonna get me better information a lot of times. Just don't get tripped up. Use the common name if you want, but just understand that sometimes it's different stuff has those names. And then there's a cultivar, which is a cultivated variety of a species. So when you hear about a desert willow called Bubba desert willow, Bubba isn't the name of the species. It's not even the common name. It's the cultivar name of that particular Bubba, or that particular desert willow. It's Bubba. So you find, some special tree that has this name, lilac, blah, 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 right? Mountain laurel, or whatever it is, or vitex or something. Don't get confused with what the tree is and the specific name. Like there's a bazillion crepe myrtles out there. Don't get tripped up on the cultivar name of that particular one, okay? But yeah, when you're looking up a tree, just study it. That's what I like to do. Go on, look up a few websites, see what it says. There's different opinions on different trees. And then you can become familiar and gain some confidence, but be humble about it, because even the most knowledgeable, people that are way more knowledgeable than me, I've seen them make mistakes. And so that knowledge can be dangerous, so just be careful. And but have some confidence, but kind of not a full confidence, like I 100% know what I'm doing. Be confident enough to plant the tree, but be humble enough to keep learning about it. And there may be something that you don't know, that any of us know. But yeah, if you're looking up on search engines, you can go to the images tab on a search engine. One of the most helpful tools. One of the most helpful tools is the images tab. Look up on the actual information from different websites, get some different opinions, and see how those kind of correlate. Because sometimes there's biases in there. And that's really helpful though. Maybe go to a plant nursery and look at the actual plant you're thinking of and get a familiarization of it. Maybe look at the tree, see if you can find one in the area. So without further ado, let's get into some actual tree selection ideas. One, and I've got a list of them, and we can talk about some more at the end if y'all want, or rebring some of these back to service. One of my favorites is desert willow. Like I said, that's the Bubba is probably, I don't know, maybe 80%, 75-80% of all desert willows are a Bubba cultivar, which was found by my friend that used to run the botanical garden in San Antonio. And one day he just found it growing, had crossed and volunteer just sprouted, and he was like, what is this got a real pretty flower? And when I bought my house, there was one already planted in my yard, and I was so thrilled. But it's one of my favorites because they're very tough. I mean, very tough. They're, you know, when it had ice on it, you know, in Snowmageddon, it was just hanging down and didn't break. And it came back next year. It flowers all the time. It doesn't need a lot of water, so it can handle a lot of stuff. It doesn't get real big. Every tree's got its ups and its downs, you know, upside, downside. But that's a real good one. It's not a big shade tree, but it can produce some shade, and it's a pretty ornamental. And this is next one is probably my favorite tree. Like I said, probably live oak's my favorite, but of trees that I'm willing to plant, this is probably my number one, is a mulberry. Now, mulberries used to be common. People knew what they were. And now our culture has kind of sloughed off lots of different things. And some of that is different tree species and plant species. People have lost track of them, lost interest in them, whatever. Because everybody wants to plant an oak, right? So everybody wants to plant, what's the best tree? What's the toughest? What's the strongest tree? What's the most legendary tree, right? So people gravitate towards oaks, which I get, that totally makes sense, except for because there's oak wilt in the area, I don't recommend planting any oaks. Not even the white oak group. The white oaks can get oak wilt also. They used to not think that they could. Maybe they do a little bit better sometimes, but they absolutely can get oak wilt. And they can spread oak wilt. And Texas A&M Forest Service changed that on their website, even. So mulberry, you can have a red mulberry, which is the native. It's native to North America. You can have a white mulberry or a black mulberry. Those both have been brought in from other areas, from like Asia and stuff. And white mulberry is what the silk trade was completely based off in China. White mulberry is what that caterpillar eats. They eat the leaves on those, and that is what makes silk. White mulberry is a really cool tree. If you want something that isn't going to track like blackberry type fruit in your house, don't plant a red fruiting or black fruiting mulberry near your house, because you'll be tracking, people be tracking stuff in your house. The fruit on it looks like a blackberry. It's not usually as tart. Really delicious, but the white fruiting ones, and sometimes the red can be crossbred and with a white mulberry, and you can have white fruit on either of those two, white or red mulberries. Those have basically a clear juice when you step on them, and they're really delicious, honestly. And my neighbor has one that was planted probably when the house was built in the 1930s, and the thing is probably at least 30-35 feet tall, if not bigger than that. Really big tree. It's lasted all these years, and I have taken cuttings. You're talking about cuttings. Well, fig trees you can propagate from cuttings pretty easily. Mulberry trees you can too. So this year, in March, February, somewhere in there, I took some cuttings. He gave me some cuttings from his tree, my neighbor, and I'm gonna just experiment, and I'm just gonna see how this goes. So I put probably 15, 20 cuttings in an area about this big, just in one of my gardens that I have some good soil in. Just stuck them all in there. No leaves, no roots, no anything, and I just want to see what happens. And then they started sprouting leaves. One of them, at least one of them, or two of them maybe, had little white fruit that I ate from cuttings. I was just like, what in the world? They're like, yeah, we've never seen it fruit. I've seen that has the same exact genetics as that tree, and I ate fruit off of it. White fruit. I have been experimenting a bunch with this, and what I've been doing is I've been taking my pocket knife, once again, cutting the bottom leaves off of the shoots. So some of them have shoots that have been growing and growing and growing. And just to verify this morning, I went out there, I have one of them is this tall. From cuttings from February, March. And the other, another one that's close, and some other ones that are shorter, and then a bunch that are smaller. That's awesome. If you're a plant person, you know, you probably think that's great, like I do, right? So that is a tree that can be a shade tree. It can last a long time. It's very tough in our area. So the mulberry is one of my favorites, and it's really good for wildlife. It's just a good tree in a lot of ways. One of my next favorite is Arizona cypress. It looks like a Christmas tree. It's got that, they call X-current shape. Kind of like real narrow, tall, pointed in the middle, generally, more or less. And those just do really well in our area. They're very tough. They're very tough trees. And there are some, if anybody is interested in going and doing a trip to go get some seeds from some Texas native Arizona cypress that we have, I can tell you where there are some. I haven't been able to make it down there yet. What's that?
They grow tall.
They do. They grow tall. Yeah, they can 5 years, maybe 15 feet tall, and then so on. 20 foot tall after probably 4 to 10 years, hopefully.
That's my son's problem.
Growing tall.
15 years, I'm not gonna worry about it.
Okay, the tree is. Okay.
That's my
I got
son.
it.
I said that's my son's problem.
Well, hey, I'm okay with you planting problems as long as they're not the wrong kind of problem. They can, it's good for people to have work to do. That's fine. Just you don't want it to be an overwhelming problem, right? If you want it to be a manageable issue, how about that? Arizona cypress. It's not going to be a big shade tree. But it's really good for a privacy screen. It's really good to add some kind of, what do you call it, like an alpine feel, they're real tough in our area. Crepe myrtle. In all my years of doing tree trimming and removal, I never saw crepe myrtle fall in a house. I just never saw one. They're very tough. They're not from here. They're from Asia, but they've been in the United States so long that they're just a beloved tree, like in the South. There's just tons of different cultivars you can find. I'll say, do your research. If you want a crepe myrtle and you want this big, beautiful shade tree, you might accidentally buy a dwarf crepe myrtle that's meant to be a shrub, right? Don't do that. Look them up. Just research what's out there, and you can find all different kind of information on crepe myrtles. The white flowered ones have like a cinnamon bark that's real pretty. That bark type is called exfoliating. It sloughs off every year, and when it does, it's got that really pretty color on the bark, that cinnamon color. So here's another one, and that one also, the crepe myrtles. Those deer love to ruin those trees. So if you're gonna do that, just know what you're getting into. Put something around it, or if you have a good high fence or something like that, or if you're in a neighborhood where there's not any deer or whatever, which is not many places around here. Just know what you're getting into. Any of the trees that stay smooth bark as they grow, the deer like those more. Here's one you may have never heard of. It's called a southern catalpa. Catalpa. C-A-T-A-L-P-A.
Slowly.
S-L, no, I'm just kidding. C-A-T-A-L-P-A. There are some growing on, in Bernie. What's that road?
46. River Road.
No, it's
School Road?
it's not Bernie Stage, it's the next one up towards Bernie. It's,
Young Springs?
right after the Starbucks over there, you go a little ways, there's a road that kind of cuts through at an angle, the Teton Beauregard maybe? It might be Teton Beauregard, I can't remember, but anyway, there's a road over there that has, 3 or 4 southern catalpa trees that are 20, 30 feet tall. Never heard of it, right? They grow in our area. Why aren't they in our area? Like at the landscape nurseries? Because there's not a demand and people don't know. A lot of landscape folks have never even heard of it. They've never seen it. But because I'm out here treating oak wilt and I'm seeing it decimate whole areas of forest, I'm very interested in trees that are not as common. Now, we gotta be super careful not to push through to trees that are not gonna be well suited for our areas. But we can find some that are kind of on the edges of what the norm would be. And southern catalpa, I mean, you can go walk and look at those trees, they're there. And, you know, they're, like I said, they're, I don't know, 25, 30 feet tall or whatever, and they have a real pretty flower on them. Yeah, Indian cigar bean, I think is what another name for them. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna ask about the bean.
Yep. It's a very interesting tree. It's not a leg bean. It looks like a bean pod. It has this like wafer looking seed inside. It's very interesting. I got some seeds from it. That's what I do. I go, oh, there's a bird. Okay. So a lot of y'all can probably relate. Oh, what is that? What was that? So there's one. Fruiting pear tree. Okay, not the Bradford pear that has it's fruitless. Those tend to break limbs anyways. They're an ornamental. I'm talking about fruit-bearing pear tree. Bartlett pear. There's a bunch. There's an Asian pear. There's a few of them. But I was at a fruit tree training thing, and one of the Texas A&M, extension folks or whatever was like, if you can't grow a pear tree, we can't help you. That's what they said. And I was like, I think I want to try that. Because what I really encourage you to do is plant the things that are going to be the most you're going to have success with, so that you can be encouraged by the confidence you've built from being successful. And then maybe branch out a little bit, because that confidence is a big deal. And if you're planting something like a fruiting pear tree, that may really encourage you. You can eat lots of food from them. And it's another one like mulberry. It used to be really common to have pear trees, and it's just not, because everybody's like, well, I like apples, so I'm just gonna be apple. Well, apples don't really do that awesome here. They can do okay. They can make it, but they're generally not gonna be my go-to fruit tree for that kind of, for like that size of a fruit. So fruiting pear. Another one is American elm tree. Who's been to the Backyard Bistro? Anybody been over there? Okay. Those trees in the little parking lot right there, those are American elms. American elm. Now that's the tree that basically made Dutch elm disease famous in the United States when it came up into the Northeast. But they're in our area naturally. You'd be hard pressed to find one at a nursery, but they're in the area and they can do okay. Yes, ma'am.
Do we have any problems with the borers?
The emerald ash borer for
Yeah.
ash trees, not here yet. They're in like
Yeah.
Dallas area. I didn't put any ash trees on here because the one that they planted, like 50 billion of them in San Antonio, the Arizona ash trees, they only last like 20, 30 years. They can work, but there's a couple native ones that are real small that they're kind of almost not worth mentioning in a way, because you can't find them anywhere. So I'm not really worried about. I don't plant ash trees, so I just don't even really worry about it. Yes, ma'am.
I was just gonna ask a quick question, 'cause, in San Antonio, when I lived there, we planted bur oak, and I love bur oaks, but they are also susceptible to oak wilt.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
And they actually don't like the heat very well. They actually don't really do well in drought. So I've seen them suffer pretty bad. So I stopped planting those. Monterey oak was my favorite, but then we had the snowpocalypse. I saw a bunch of those die back and even have a really hard time. But I generally don't plant oak trees. I don't recommend it.
Okay.
But the American elm, you know, you can see examples. You go to Fredericksburg, I'll see American elm randomly here and there in Fredericksburg. They're just not something you're gonna find at the nursery. If we had a ton of them, Dutch elm disease might take them all out, but because of the biodiversity and they're spread out, it's gonna be harder for that to do anything to them. Our native elm tree that we have is called the cedar elm, because it grows in cedar groves, but it's an elm tree, so the cedar elm, this name, word cedar in the front kind of is confusing. It's an elm tree, but they drop limbs, and some of the people that I respect the most in the tree world are like, I'm done, or they don't recommend them at all, because they tend to drop limbs. And it can kill people. It's, you know, they're in the area, they're not a bad tree, but I wouldn't plant one near my house. I wouldn't, you know, maybe on a back fence or something like that, out of the way. But they'll drop limbs. And pecans do the same thing. I don't recommend planting pecans near your house. Another tree, also, I'm sorry, Chinese elm, also known as a lacebark elm. That's a pretty good tree, but when we had snowpocalypse, once again, those got hit hard. My dad has one in Helotes, and it froze to the ground. It's come back, and it's taller, you know, it's well taller than me now, but it froze to the ground, or real close to it. So I prefer a Chinese elm over a cedar elm, probably. Here's another one, and this is not a citrus tree. It is called Osage orange, also known as a bodark, or Bois d'Arc is a French. When the French saw the Native Americans up in Kansas area, they had these bows made out of this orange wood, and it's a really pretty orange wood. And so I was like, man, I found one in Bernie, growing volunteer. Well, there's a humongous one in Fredericksburg that I saw. I mean, it's huge. Recently, I found one in Bandera, right across from the big antique store as you're going down the river. So you're driving down, the river's in front of you, antique store's here. Right here is a humongous Osage orange tree. If you look it up, if you do a search engine search with the images and look up Osage orange fruit, it looks like kind of like a brain. It's like a green, big, weird looking fruit. They're real cool, but they're kind of tough, and they grow in our area. You never heard of one probably, and unless you lived up northeast of here or something. It'd be really hard to find one in a nursery. Nevertheless, that's something that I'd like to grow, you know, and I have seeds for that. Anaqua is another one, also known as Indian sandpaper. They grow really well in San Antonio, but I have one on my property. I don't even know how it got there, but it's made it, and sometimes it'll kind of freeze back and whatever. It's real dense green foliage. There's a lot of weird crossing stuff, real hard wood, real interesting tree. Good food for wildlife. Don't plant it over your driveway. It's real messy, but real small fruit. But it's an Anaqua. Vitex. I think I saw one out here. There's one out there on the fence line. Vitex, they don't get real big. They're real pretty trees, real fragrant. They're not really a shade tree, so it kind of barely makes the list because they're kind of barely a tree. But they're pretty tough. You can cut those back and get real good flowering generally each year if you want to. There's redbud. There's a bunch of different kinds of redbuds. The eastern redbud grows like crazy, but it does need more water. Don't plant that near your house. It'll drive you insane because it grows really kind of sporadic, and it'll just grow right into your house continually. You'll be cutting, oh, look, this nice, you know, cute little tree. We'll keep it pruned away. No, it'll be, you're just doing it all the time. So plant it away, a little ways away, 20 feet away from your house at a minimum. But those can be good. The Texas redbud, they don't get as big. They're pretty tough. Black walnut. Black walnut grows into our area all the way up to at least Bulverde. So I've seen them in the wild. Texas walnut are, they don't have good meat in the nut, but they're in our area already. They're already in this area. Honey locust is another one. That's a legume. Those can have thorns, so you wanna get a non-thorn variety, thornless variety. Black locust is another one. That one's really good for bees. So I've ordered some seeds, and one of those things on what are these different kinds of black locusts, and like learning all this stuff. And that's been a process that I've gone through in the last like couple of years, is the honey locust and black locust. As far as, and like I said, it's gonna be hard to find a lot of these, but we'll get to where to look for trees here in a second. Elderberry, kind of more of a bush. You could train it maybe into a little tree, but because we want to talk a little bit about fruit bearing stuff, elderberry is good. We have some in my house. Fig trees do really well in our area. And you can propagate those from cuttings. They're just not usually a shade tree. Mexican sycamore is another one. Those grow, the sycamore, maybe not the Mexican variety, but the sycamores grow fast. They grow in our area. I wouldn't plant it near a house because it's not super tough and it'll drop a limb. Pecan, same thing, but they kind of need good soil. But they drop limbs. Don't plant it near your house, please. Afghan pine. It's a conifer, it's a pine tree. If you go to the Pipe Creek Christmas tree farm, that's mostly what they have growing there. We have calcium-based soil. It's limestone, very high pH. A lot of pine trees and conifers do not do well in high alkaline soil. Afghan pine is one that does, and that's why they grow up there. And if you wanted a pine tree, that's the one I would recommend. Another one of my favorites is loquat, which I finally have some loquats growing. They can get hit by the cold, but there's some varieties that I've found, some specimens I've found in our area that have made it through all the drought and cold and everything, produce good fruit. Not usually a big shade tree, more of a boundary tree for privacy.
How long does it usually take to get a fruit on a loquat tree?
I don't know. I mean, probably a good 4 years, 5 years, maybe a little bit more than that.
Going on 2, halfway there.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, those are one of my favorites. I mean, they're really good.
I have one about 7 years old, and this is the first year.
Okay, okay. There you go. So if you do it from a cutting or from a grafting, I might cut it down to less, 3-4 years maybe. Something. That's generally how it works. If you do it from seed, it'll take longer usually. So these are trees for water, near water only. If you have natural water, willow, bald cypress, Montezuma cypress. Montezuma cypress is similar to bald cypress, same genus. Wouldn't plant any of those 3 unless you have water naturally and consistently. You can go on a limb and say, well, I have an irrigation system, so I'll just go ahead and do it. If that fails, you could be in an issue, or decades down the road, you know, your son might be dealing with it, right? That'd be kind of how it'd be. There are some natives that you can look at. Gum tree, Gum bumalia, also known as a woolly buckthorn. It kind of looks like an oak tree. There's all the different oaks, the red oaks, the live oaks, chinkapin, shin oak, and lacy oak. Then you've got your mountain cedar. Don't overlook the mountain cedar, because if you have oak wilt, that may be all you end up with. And so don't take them for granted. Just thin them out, sure, go to town, but it's probably wise to leave some. You know, you can train them a little bit sometimes. Box elder, Texas persimmon, one of my favorites because they're super tough. Escarpment cherry is a black cherry that we have in our area. Mountain laurel, and my least favorite of all, or most hated of all, hackberry, which I will also recommend if you have one growing anywhere near your house, cut it down. If you have it out in the pasture, you know, wildlife or whatever. Watering, I recommend when you're planting a tree, water 3 times a week for 2 weeks. And then the following 2 weeks, water 2 times a week. And then from there on, water 1 time, 1 deep watering a week until the end of the following summer. Now, if you plant when it's too hot, you may need to up that, or you may need to extend how long you do 3 times a week, or you may even wanna do 4 times a week starting out. But I don't recommend planting in those times of the year.
Can you say that all again, Jonathan?
Yes, I can, absolutely, absolutely. 3 times a week for 2 weeks. Then 2 times a week for 2 weeks. And then 1 time a week until the end of the following summer. And then you can water supplementally if you feel like it needs it, the tree's looking bad, or have extreme drought or heat. And then, let's get to questions here in a second, but where you can find trees, you can go to one of the closest places is that Texas Design Landscape in Bandera. You can go to Rainbow Gardens in San Antonio is pretty good. The Garden Center in San Antonio, right down Bandera Road. You get through the Lotus. Fanix Nursery over in like China Grove area, southeast side of San Antonio, has probably Fanix.
That's where my mom goes.
Yeah, that's probably the best selection in the whole area.
Really?
Yeah, as far as fruit trees goes, if you want natives, there's a place, I forget the exact name of it, natives of Texas or native plants of Texas, something like that, between the town of Medina and Kerrville on 16, call ahead. Old guy that's got a lot of really unique plants that you literally will probably not find anywhere else, or at least not anywhere near here. Call ahead. Other than that, you might have to go online, and you're not gonna probably get big plants if you do that, you know, just know what you're getting into. But I tell you what, I bought a pear tree from Home Depot. Why? Because it was, you know, I think it was a Bartlett pear. It was what I wanted, and they happen to have it there. Why not buy it there? There's not a problem with that. But a lot of times they'll have stuff that they're just throwing out there just to see what sticks. So unless you know what you're getting into, I don't recommend that you just buy some random thing at Home Depot or something. Do your research first on it. I bought a Texas Star peach the other day for my wife at a grocery store in Comfort, at the Lowe's in Comfort, because I've been looking for that specific cultivar, because my dad had one and it was prolific, tons of fruit, did really well. So I saw it. I don't care where I'm at. I could be at a Buc-ee's. I don't care if it's the tree I'm looking for, and I didn't plant it because I saw it in the spring. So it's in this little shaded spot where I'm just trying to nurture it and get it to fall so I can plant it. And I got, some other stuff I'm planning to plant. I'm just trying to get it there. So whenever you buy it, the best time to buy it is when you see it. Just don't plant it necessarily when you buy it. Yes, ma'am.
And what was that, peach tree name again?
Texas Star, or Tex Star, might be one word. I might use the SY, something like that. It's a real good one. I mean, we picked more fruit off that one tree than we knew what to do with. So, all right, so I think that's it. We have a little bit of time, I think, for questions. Not much. A couple questions, maybe. You got a question, sir?
How do you feel about mimosa?
They don't do well in our area. We're in an area where we have a lot of rot in hardwood, and they tend to rot out from the inside. If you go east of here, they have more consistent rainfall, and mimosas tend to be a weed. But in our area, I've hardly ever seen them thriving. They can survive, but they're not usually thriving. So they're okay.
I've got one that's beautiful but I keep hearing, don't plant them.
Yeah, it's one of those ones. It's kind of might barely make it. Yeah, yes, ma'am.
What about bare root trees?
Yeah, bare root trees are great. You gotta plant them right away. I tried to get a pomegranate, bare rooted it, didn't make it, and it was in the wrong time of the year, and even just trying to pot it up, it didn't make it. So if you do a bare root, just do it at the right time of the year. You can even get something and just pot it and just kind of bank it for a while. Put it in the shade and water it when it needs it, once a week at least. And just wait until it's the right time to plant, or just time it with the fall.
So would you recommend pomegranate for our area, John?
Yeah.
Fruit producing or flowering pomegranate?
I am over anything that doesn't produce fruit. We live in a generally fruitless society. And I think that that's a problem. You know, it's like we want things that are not messy. And the Bible says otherwise, you know, where there's great strength from the ox, but the manger's messy. So there's stuff that goes along with having the thing that does good for you. There's the downside, and I'm tired of not doing things because the downside. I wanna have something that produces fruit. I think I saw a hand, yes ma'am.
On the crepe myrtles,
Uh-huh.
they have several trunks, some that I just planted last winter. And you said not to have multiple trunks, should I?
Okay, that's a very good question, and that is maybe the exception or trees that are like that, so let me cover that real quick. If you have a U shape in between branching and let's say it grows like this. This can never grow together because of the angle, but if the angle is like this, they will grow together. And if you can think about, if this adds, every year if it does this, it'll never do that. It'll never grow together, right? Whereas if you have this shape, before too long, this can grow together. If you have any bump up here, it'll start growing together, especially if they're like this, if they're parallel, is really the main thing. With crepe myrtle, that's very normal. Just that bottom thing should be more of a U shape rather than a V. If the bark gets included in that joint, that's called a bark inclusion. It's really bad. You don't want that. So prune out anything that would be a bark inclusion or that's touching or rubbing.
Okay.
Yeah, crepe myrtles, that's really normal with those.
What about an olive tree?
Olives kind of grow in our area, but we actually have an olive industry in South Texas, and it was decimated when there's people that just straight up shut down when we had the Snowmageddon thing. You might be able to grow them, but they generally will freeze back. I think we've been in more of a cold cycle in the last, couple of years, and the Spanish actually brought over olive trees from Europe, and they're called Mission olives, and they've been in the area for a long time. But when you have a cold snap, if you go a little bit too far north, they're gonna just die down. Or if you have a freak, weather event, yes ma'am. Yeah.
So you're talking about mulching around the trees, remind me of, Cibolo Center, you can go get mulch free. Do you ever have to worry about importing oak wilt if you don't have oak wilt?
That's a good question. If it gets mulched, it destroys oak wilt. It's done deal.
Okay.
Because there's so many microbes in the open environment that they will attack the surface area, the surface of that mulch, and all that surface area is covered by all those microbes. And oak wilt is a horrible competitor in the open environment. It's a really good competitor in the tree.
Gotcha.
So if it gets in the tree, it's really hard to stop. But out in the open, once it's mulched. Now, if you have a tree trunk that has the spore mat, the fungal mat on there, and nothing's happened to it, that's viable for 6 months to a year.
Okay.
But once it's mulched, if you burn it, that's good. If you bury it, that's good. The worst thing you can do is leave it above ground in place. Yeah, I think we have a hand over here.
I make my own mulch out of leaves and limbs. I have a cutters with both
Uh-huh.
to cut it up fine.
Is there?
Is that?
Yeah, that's just a rough mulch. That's more like a permaculture technique. That's they call that chop and drop. So you can, a whole different thing, but like I have Texas sage plants, those Texas sage bushes that have those pretty flowers on them when it rains, before it rains. They know when it's gonna rain, it seems, as the old tale goes. But I've been thinking, if I got a hedge trimmer out there and just trimmed 3 inches like this, every 3 inches, just trimmed it down into nothing, that's a whole pile of mulch. And so you can use cedar trees like that. I've done chop and drop with cedars, and you just cut it up into little pieces and use that as a real rough mulch. Yeah.
I make a lot of it.
Yeah, I mean, it works great. I mean, it doesn't matter what it looks like.
Yeah.
It matters how it functions. Now, if you want it to look nice, do that, or collect your leaves, or get your leaf blower and blow your yard out where you don't want the leaves into a bed where you do. Maybe design a bed, put a bed in a spot that's gonna be close to where all your leaves are gonna be. use that as your mulch, and then put a thin layer, wet it down so it's laying kind of flat, and then put a thin layer of the prettier mulch, the nice mulch that you want on the top, and dress it up a little bit, and you've got a lot of free mulch there.
I heard you talk about you use your leaves in mulching, and then you said blow them into your garden beds or whatever.
Or like a landscape bed. Is
Right,
really what I mean.
right, I'm sorry, not, yeah, landscape bed, but I had heard that the leaves are where the 700 to 900 Texas species of solitary bees live. So if you're getting rid of your leaves, you're taking away their habitat, so leave some, so that they can, you know, so you don't have to,
Yeah.
you don't have to mulch all your leaves.
There you go.
Maybe.
So if you have
Yeah.
some, I mean, if you have a pile of leaves this thick anyway, then, you know, in your yard where you really don't want them,
Right.
maybe you'll leave another area for
Yeah.
them to, you know, have it as their habitat or whatever. Plum tree. They're not super common. I don't know a lot about them. Yeah, I've seen them work. I've seen plum trees work. A lot of times they're the ornamental plums.
No, edible.
Yeah. I think even the edible ones are used as ornamental because of the color, because they have a real dark red color, dark maroon color.
Okay.
Plums and apricots, I've seen in our area, but they're not common, so I don't know a lot about them. It's not a big one you're gonna find. Everybody prefers a peach tree, you know, generally, so you're gonna find peaches way more.
Is it a pistachio tree?
There's a Chinese pistachio. I kind of look at the Chinese pistachio like I would a Arizona ash tree. They tend not to live past 20, 30 years in our area. Maybe a little bit more, but they grow real skinny and tall, and so in the nurseries they cut them and they force them to branch. So you know when you cut something down to the ground and you got like 8 stems come up, and then you look at a field and there's like this huge 8-stem hackberry, you know, that's because somebody mowed it down and then let it grow back. When you have that, yeah, you can end up with issues, and so that when they cut them, that tends to happen. But because that happens, now you have bark inclusions all in there, and then a huge section of that tree just falls. And I've seen it a lot of times, and so I really don't recommend Chinese pistachio.
Jonathan, there's a
Yeah.
question back.
Yes, sir.
Grapefruit.
No, sir. No, like I was saying earlier, no citrus. I mean, grapefruit is one of the more hardy ones. There was a really pretty, huge grapefruit tree in Sonterra in San Antonio, and I used to work over there, and I would drive by this thing, and man, that's pretty. That's a huge tree. Wow. I want to get a cutting on that tree and try to root it, you know, because you can root citrus. Well, I drove by it after the Snowmageddon, and it wasn't there anymore. And so I stick to my guns. I don't recommend doing citrus trees. It is a heartache. It just is. If you do it inside and you know what you're getting into, you do a greenhouse or something, okay, but you can do anything in that, you know.
You got one of them.
How far from a house can you plant a fruit tree? Like, how far out should it be?
That's kind of a loaded question. How close do you want the fruit to be to your house? Because you know what I mean, like,
for the ground and the foundation and the roots.
you know, I don't think I've ever seen a tree ruin a foundation.
Okay.
In all my years of doing tree stuff, and there's people, look at this root right here. You know, especially in hybrid live oaks and Arizona ash trees. That's
So if I'm 6 feet out and I don't care and it's in a spot where I want it,
It
I'm
depends
okay.
on what it is. If it's like a fig tree, yeah, totally. But if you're gonna plant, you know, like a mulberry tree that can get a trunk diameter like this eventually, you know, you may not wanna put it anywhere near that close, you know? So what I generally recommend, the only 2 trees I recommend, that I recommend planting right around your house would be, or having, not planting, but having around your house, are a live oak, because the limbs are so strong, it's very hard for them to break and fall in a house. Even when they do, they stay connected a lot of times and don't really do much damage, or crepe myrtle. That's about it. Anything else beyond that, I just push it out. You're just asking for a lot of maintenance.
I have so much maintenance with all the garbage that grows on the rocks right now.
Yeah.
Anything's gonna be
You
better.
know, mountain laurels, probably some of the ones that I mentioned that are smaller, Vitex.
We got a natural mountain laurel, it's beautiful.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, that sort of thing. Yep. Any more questions? Did I cover it sufficiently?
Great job.
Thank you.
I have some business cards up here.
Oh, I didn't.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. As he says, he's got some business cards there. We've got drawings.
Did everybody get a ticket when they came in?
I did.
Upper needs a ticket? Okay.
Who needs a ticket?
And we do have, if you are interested in helping with the teaching garden to pour and tamp down the decomposed granite on September 14th, we do have a sign-up sheet here. If you're interested, put your name down and we'll contact you about that.
We'll just send out a reminder to you.
Yes, so we will send a reminder out on the email. Does everybody now who wants a drawing ticket have a drawing ticket? And while she's shaking the tickets, let me tell you that in September, our September meeting is going to be on the third Saturday. So it won't compete with the Hayden Festival. And it won't be a meeting with a program like this. We're actually going to have our fall plant sale. So if anybody has some little plants they want to contribute to that plant sale, we call it a sale, but we actually ask for donations from the public.
It's donations only.
So, be aware that that's gonna be happening on Saturday, September 21st, rather than a program. And we will send a reminder out about that too.
I'll say if y'all have any, trees that y'all wanted to kind of champion as part of the garden club, there's a lot on that list that you can't find anywhere. And if y'all grew them and got them out in the community, that could be a really cool thing because y'all could be a real major source for that. Because there's just not a source in our area and people need alternatives.
Yeah, maybe we'll stay in touch with you about that.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, I'm not sure what where we.
They're right in here.
So we have two prizes. The first goes to 641-286. Yay!
Who's winner?
And the next prize winner is 641-359.
Last but not least.
And you remember that we've got these freebies over here, the various seeds and the books.
Also, our team, we need some of these for people to take the bucket.
Yes.
We also have, if any of you are propagating trees or things like that, we have some good buckets that we're recycling. And those are actually wine bottle holders, but they work great for seed starting.
Cut them up before you
Cut 'em up.
Yeah, messed up on the.
I did too.